I know where he is. Yeah, it's been there for years. Yes. Well, I remember, I used to go by mine all the time.
Yeah.
I know where he is. Yeah, it's been there for years. Yes. Well, I remember, I used to go by.
To value your time and everything, we're going to go ahead and get started. I think it seems like everybody kind of knows everybody, or maybe not, but afterwards maybe you can meet somebody you don't know. And the purpose of these meetings are informational for you all. So what the format is that I have the proponents present, and then you are welcome to ask them questions. I do control the time, so again, this doesn't run on forever. So if you have a very important question, make sure you ask it promptly. The other thing is that I do recommend to you to remember, just like Jeopardy, to give your question in the form of a question. This is not a chance for a argument or discussion. This is really a chance for you to hear what the proponent has to say, and for you to start to think about what are the questions that you do have on their particular article. Okay? So, just a couple other housekeeping things. In terms of articles that have been pulled, Article 12 and Article 14 have been withdrawn. Again, those are contract negotiations, and they haven't gotten along far enough that they will not be presented. And then the other article that has been pulled is Article 22, which was going to be an amendment to the operating budget, and that has also been pulled. So you can update your books on that. So, just to kind of give a rundown, again, general articles, Article 1 and 2, you all know those are the ones we have every year. The only thing that's different, Article 2, in case you want to know, the election date for 2019 is going to be April 6th, but that's also printed in your warrant. And then for topics for this evening are going to be Article 20, 21, and 4. We're going to start with 21 because they were the first person that responded to me and got the first time slot. Again, Article 21 is on the funding of the audit, a review of other procedures for a report, and I wrote the first part of the motion here. It is as printed in your warrant, and I do have some copies of it out here if somebody needs to have it. So, I would invite Lee to come up and present.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Eileen Sickler. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 4. I just have a few PowerPoint slides, and then Jim Powers is here from Powers and Sullivan, and we can go through Q&A with Mr. Powers. So, here's an overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. So, what the review is. As part of the language included in the warrant article, there are the words "other procedures." These other procedures are called agreed upon procedures, and its name really describes the process that we want from Powers and Sullivan. When approved by town meeting, and that will be a majority vote, the needed procedures will be discussed and agreed upon between Ways and Means and Powers and Sullivan so that we receive the answers to the what, when, and how surrounding this deficit. While reviewing transactions in FY18, if a significant discrepancy is discovered, which means that Powers and Sullivan may have to go back and do procedures into FY17, Powers and Sullivan will come back to Ways and Means. They will discuss and determine if it's something that can be addressed otherwise, but regardless, Powers and Sullivan will take direction from Ways and Means before proceeding to years outside of FY18. An example of these procedures could include looking at approval and authority limits over spending for the policies and verifying they were in compliance. The procedures could also include analytical reviews for various expense totals, as well as verifying the assumptions made as part of conversations during review. The work under this article will look at policies and procedures and, most importantly, test those procedures and report on the findings. The report will also include recommendations for improved procedures and internal controls. So, trying to clarify the distinction between an audit and agreed upon procedures. As you can see from the slide, an audit refers to financial statements. doesn't address policies and procedures for testing these procedures to make sure there's control over spending. I bring up sort of a corny example, and that is your household checkbook. It may reconcile each month, but it doesn't tell you if the amount spent was in your budget, or if you got a buy-in or approval from your spouse for a bill over a certain amount. So again, your checkbook may balance, but how you got there is the real what, when, and how. An audit is performed each year for the town by Powers & Sullivan, and the school's financial accounts are included. That's operating, accommodated, revolving, and student activities. The auditor gives an opinion on those financial statements of the entire town as a cumulative number. The opinion allows the reader to rely on the reasonableness of those financial statements. While the school's financials are included in the audit, it really doesn't tell you about the policies or procedures or the integrity of those procedures, sort of like the checkbook example. You won't be able to know how the undetected deficit happened by reading the town's audited financial statements. This is why we are requesting the review of agreed-upon procedures. Based on the response for audited financials from the school, the last actual audit for the schools alone from a non-governmental entity was for the Francis Wyman Before and After School program, and that was in the year 2013. So, only facts. Unlike an audit, there's no opinion given to a report with agreed-upon procedures. It's up to the school committee and school business office to react to the observations and recommendations provided by Powers & Sullivan. So, is any of this work redundant? The school committee has reacted favorably by engaging Powers & Sullivan on a consulting engagement for FY19. Mr. Sullivan will assist in developing monthly financial reporting, test new procedures, and review the December 31, 2018 school-generated financial reports. That's great news, and it reflects recognition by the school committee and school administration that they need to have reliable financial reporting and forecasting in place, as well as functioning internal controls. A management letter describes control weaknesses and is a document that is created for each town-wide audit, which happens annually, such in this case it would be June 30, 2018. Typically, the town-wide audit and related financials and management letter is finished in December or January each year. Since this undetected deficit is a material weakness, Powers & Sullivan will need to do some level of work in order to describe the weakness. However, Powers & Sullivan does not have to go into depth and only needs to look on the surface to accomplish this. The work required under Article 21 will be different than what is required to write the management letter comment. There are different procedures and testing required to answer our what, when, and how questions compared to the work for the management letter. The following are some examples of agreed-upon procedures that aren't necessarily the same in creating the comment for the management letter. Look at invoices in detail, determine if they were processed in the correct year, apply analytical procedures, create procedures to confirm details, and the report will be similar to the report for the music department. And why is this review so important? Well, hindsight's terrific, and some believe they know how the deficit happened. While we may think we know how this happened, until we have the related assumptions tested and proven, we won't know for sure how it occurred or how to avoid this from happening again. And this is what auditors do. They test assumptions by looking at documents, among other steps that support the procedure and related expenses. The review will include facts and findings presented in a clear and organized report. An undetected deficit can easily happen when you don't have reports that show how much money for expenses was spent to date, in addition to how much money was committed, in contrast to how much money was budgeted. Having a comprehensive report with integrity is essential to reliable financial reporting, both on an interim and year-end basis. The integrity of these reports is a direct result of having proper internal controls, and that includes good, solid, tested procedures. And without this integrity, you potentially suffer the consequence of overspending, and worse yet, have it be a surprise. Credibility and trust. If nothing else, supporting this article is worth the investment in establishing confidence and trust in our school committee and school administration. It also shows they are upholding their fiduciary responsibility that includes transparent and reliable, timely financial and non-financial reporting. Why this article? We also, as town meeting members, have a fiduciary responsibility for the town's budgets and expenditures, and this includes all town departments, with or without elected boards. The proponents of this article quickly received over 400 signatures from registered voters in town who agree that some level of accounting services are required, and that Ways and Means should be the proper authority to oversee and direct the work of Powers and Sullivan. Ways and Means will work with Powers and Sullivan to create procedures that will address our questions as to how this undetected deficit happened. The petition with over 400 signatures reflects their lack of patience with the reasons given for the culmination of financial miscues in the last 12 months. It also reflects their frustration for a lack of accountability and responsibility. They want answers. So we ask for your support for this article so we can get the facts, improve internal controls, have confidence in our FY19 budget and related reporting, show accountability and fiduciary responsibility. Lastly, we want to have trust and have confidence in all our town boards and departments. It's not going to happen overnight, but we believe it's the right step in the right direction. Now, thank you. So we have about 20 minutes, I think, Amy, for Q&A?
You have about 10 more minutes
Oh, okay.
for Q&A.
I want to introduce Mr. Powers, founding partner of Powers and Sullivan from Wakefield since actually 1987. And they are a leading professional service firm providing accounting and auditing services to many of the municipalities around the area. Mr. Powers is a trusted professional, and he's also our town's auditor. And he's been, I know, instrumental in helping the school business office currently in with the situation.
So since it's Q&A in only 10 minutes, I'm going to ask a question.
Go for it.
And it's not because I learned something just now from the presentation. There's been several this week already discussions of this, and it's become apparent that there's some confusion with what has been looked at as a scope of work for you from the school committee and what it is that you've been talking to this group of town meeting members. I can appreciate that the same set of words can be looked at and understood to mean the same work. I used to be one of those dreaded consultants as well. It's a bad word among town meeting members.
Yeah, quickly.
Can we
What's
move it
your
along?
question?
Can you, on a single sheet of paper, put down a list of tasks that are not redundant between the two ideas or the two scopes of work that you've been talking about?
Yes, I could. That's the agreed upon procedures engagement. Agreed upon procedures are exactly what it sounds like. It's an agreement by both parties. These are the procedures that we're going to do for you based on a certain objective that you're looking to accomplish. And so you go through this particular process, and early on they said, all right, there's 15 objectives, and Eileen just kind of went through a lot of those objectives that you're trying to meet, which is different than the audit. When we do an audit, there's no agreed upon procedures between me and Paul as the Chief Financial Officer of the town for both in completing that. Audit is judgment. Audit, I do what I think I need to do in order to gain enough sufficient competent evidential matter to give an opinion on the overall financial statements and whether or not they're in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and that they're fairly stated. That's a high level, okay? And then you're talking about the secondary engaged agreed upon procedures. You may change what you want to accomplish as part of that. The articles for $50,000. Common sense, business sense. If I needed, and the audit is extremely important for a million different reasons. If I needed to do all the things that this article is talking about doing, my audit fee would be $50,000 higher. I would not be giving $50,000 worth of audit work away each year. I would go broke, okay? So those procedures that we requested will not be redundant as part of the audit. There will be some things that we will test, and we have to test. The school is the largest expenditure of town funds out of the whole fund, and we audit the process. Through Paul's office, we take a look at the school, we take a look at assessors, we take a look at treasurers, collectors, etc. We look at all the departments and all the expenses and the payroll. But We do it at this level. We do not complete the audit to give an opinion on internal controls. Okay, if you read the audit opinion, it says specifically, we did not and are not giving an opinion on internal controls. What it means talking about is looking at a deeper level of internal controls. So the financial statements, are they fairly presented and in accordance with GAAP? That's a different objective. I know that doesn't sound like one piece of paper, but when you get down and you come up with the agreed upon procedures, Ways and Means has to tell me, if this article is passed, exactly what you want out of this. Then I would recommend procedures to accomplish that. A lot of those procedures would be considered audit procedures, standard procedures that you'd go through. We'd have to test payroll, test that. We'd be looking back into the contracts. We do that anyways, but on a high level. We'd be selecting 60 tests a lot of times as part of an audit, take an understanding and test it to make sure the controls are in place. Here we might be testing hundreds of different employees, hundreds of invoices, and looking at the actual budget line item for the school. The school is a bottom line budget by law, okay? And so as long as there's a certain expenditure that is school related, I do not supplant the school committees, the superintendents, business officers, allocation of those funds, and however you want to do that with mine. If it's school related, it's okay. It's allowable. And so those are the type of things we do as part of the audit.
Quick follow-up question. Have you done this two-tiered level examination of any other school department in Massachusetts?
No.
Sharon next.
She did.
For us non-financial folks,
Mhm.
agreed upon procedures basically is a contract.
Yep.
You agree upon what you're going to do, and then you also set a fee. So
Yeah.
this is our $50,000, up to $50,000 that you couldn't go over without coming back.
Right.
Would we had the school committee meeting the other night, and they have said they've signed or done an agreed upon procedures for something similar, I guess.
No.
Okay, so.
Not the letter I gave, those as consulting. Before this deficit even started, you had the music and theater issue that we went over obviously in detail. That was an agreed upon procedures engagement that we went through and did that deep dive as we talked about it. The school committee and the superintendent at that point in time said, we think it's a good idea to do this for all our revolving funds. I believe everybody thought that was a good idea. So that was before the deficit was known. So we have an agreed upon procedures to go through that, and we're in the process of doing that. So when I wrote the letter the other day for the consulting side, I put in there, this is what we're doing. What would be redundant if this article asked us, which you did, because we talked about general fund, if you asked us to do the revolving funds. I would say that would be completely redundant because we've already been hired by the school committee to accomplish that. So that's the other agreed upon procedures. But the consulting is
It's,
nothing to
so
do.
that's consulting, it's not agreed upon procedures, and that is a hourly rate until whatever. So there's no
Right.
contract really with that, it's just a,
No, that's an engagement letter to do consulting services. But when you do
Consulting services.
But
consulting
on a different
services,
area.
you just don't know how much time and effort is going to be needed.
okay.
So I can't give, I have a good idea from an audit, I know how long that takes. I can give you an agreed upon procedures because I know how, well, I've established procedures and I've been doing this for
Okay.
30 plus years, I can give you that. Consulting is different.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that those were totally separate, okay. Thank you.
Clarification. Clarification. Jim, in the warrant article that we have, it does say revolving accounts.
I know, but that's what I've been talking to, I haven't read the article.
Well, that's what is in the actual warrant. It
And so
says,
when we do the agreed upon procedures,
but,
I will say that's redundant, let's not do it.
and I
mean,
understand, but you have been getting things from Eileen, what you want. Us on Ways and Means have different thoughts, and in this article, it says revolving. So I want to be clear that when we are talking about redundant, it does say that right here in the warrant.
All right, but I mean, I haven't seen the warrant on that, but, yeah.
right here.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
not that I haven't seen it, I
Okay.
haven't seen it, okay? I said, I could read it now, but
Okay.
if it says revolving, I'll say no, it doesn't make any sense. And we have not established the agreed upon procedures. So until you establish the agreed upon procedures, there is no contract in there. If you want me to go through and do the same thing again,
Well,
I'll
clearly
say
we
it
don't.
doesn't make
No,
any sense.
Clearly, we don't want to spend the money. I mean,
Right,
clearly.
but you're not locked into that just because it says that. It doesn't specifically say, I believe, I haven't read it. The last time I looked at it was a while ago, and it said, an audited agreed upon procedures or some other engagement type thing.
Okay,
Or
I
does
think
that
this
still
is
say that?
something that, it's noted, okay? So that we know there's, and that will be looked at, okay? Martha?
So my question is, I think it's a great idea to look at whatever we need to look at to make sure that things are clear, understood, are going forward in the right direction, and are, and that it's transparent. So I'm not against the ideas of looking at this. What I'm concerned about is the wording of this, because of things like that, and who decides? Do you and Eileen decide? Do you and the Ways and Means Committee decide? And the article also says that the Board of Selectmen is part of the decision making. So I don't know who's going to be making the decision about what gets done for this. So if town meeting chooses to do this, so who would decide?
Not me. I mean,
It would
I'll be
be-
my side,
If
but
you
you
look at our
decide.
bylaws,
Okay.
it's
Bylaw.
directly in the bylaws
Okay.
that it is under the jurisdiction of the Ways and Means Committee and the Board of Selectmen. So basically, the Board of Selectmen control the money part of it. The Ways and Means are the ones that say this is what we want looked at. Okay? It's in the warrant article, it lists Article 5, Section 2.1.2, and that's where this whole thing is spelled out.
So who will decide? I mean, so if Eileen explains it, it makes some sense, but what if?
What it would be
Somebody
up
else?
to is it would be up to the Ways
The
and Means
means.
Committee
Okay.
to decide what they want done, okay? Then the selectmen would be the ones that would say, this is how much money you have to do that, okay? And those two things, of course, always go hand in hand with however much more you contract for might mean more or less money of the $50,000 that you are spending.
So, a petition of over 100, with over 100
Correct.
signatures has been submitted to the selectmen, correct?
Yes, it's been
And
certified
so-
by my office as those people being registered voters.
So under Article 5212, it's my understanding that the Ways and Means Committee is compelled to look into
That's correct,
the finances
right?
with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. So do
Because-
we have any
Well-
knowledge of how that will proceed?
Because the problem is, this article says once you get 100 signatures, the Ways and Means is compelled to do it, but there is no financial, Ways and Means themselves do not have money to spend. So that's why it has to be asked for the money to be asked for, that the selectmen would oversee the
Right.
spending of the money.
Right, so we have a veto power in not allocating funds, or we can
That's what you're
appropriate
doing,
funds.
correct.
And at that point, there's still some, so is the Board of Selectmen on board? And does Ways and Means have a plan? Are there any agreed upon procedures?
Not yet.
Yeah, so we're gonna throw money at it and then we're not sure who's gonna do what.
Then those two groups, the Board of Selectmen and Ways and Means, would sit down and decide what do they want to have looked at.
And obviously, those are public meetings,
Yeah.
anyone can attend.
Diane,
So-
quick question in relation to,
I
this is not
I'm
to
just
hash out all those pieces.
Right, I just want to
Relationship-
respond that Ways and Means and the school committee and everyone has been working on this for a long time, so this isn't like a new, this isn't something that we have been in a shadow about. We've been meeting at least daily, actually, now. So,
Good point. Any other questions? Again, I'm gonna control it and focus it, that we are focusing on what the article is saying, or asking. Yeah.
What, I know that many people have been working on this. I know everyone has very similar goals, which is to clean up some apparent problems. And the school committee just 2 nights ago referred to an engagement letter with Powers and Sullivan. So I'd like to know what's the distinction between that work and the work that would be relying on.
I think he mentioned
That was the answer to the first question.
that, and if I can paraphrase it in plain English language. Yes, basically, I think what the school committee asked for was for him to be looking at the revolving funds.
No.
No.
I can, do you want me to explain?
Go ahead.
The other engagements are attestation engagements. We're giving an opinion or a report on findings, recommendations.
So you're referring to
This is what I'm talking about.
prior
the-
engagement
the-
with
the
regards to
audit,
the revolving.
the revolving funds, and if this passes and goes through, the other agreed upon procedures. A letter I submitted to the superintendent and school committee the other day was a consulting agreement. The consulting agreement basically says, Nicole involved in the finance people are putting together new policies and procedures related to the purchase order system, the new way they're budgeting everything, the report that's going to be done every month, and the projections that are going to be made to be presented to the school committee at open meeting every month. And what they requested from us is, can you look over the policies and procedures and the assumptions being used to accomplish what they're trying to change, and give your professional opinion, tweak it, recommend changes, but they come up with it and we're looking at it. One of the things I suggested at one of the school committee meetings was, because of the issue, and I think the superintendent Conti said, the only thing worse than the deficit in 18 would be a deficit in 19. Okay, that's what actually I said that in a meeting to him. And so what I suggested as part of this consulting piece was for me after, I said maybe December, you're well into your year, you've got your new processes in place, people are supposed to be following the new rules. It may make sense that I come in January before the school committee sees what Nicole's put together for that budget and her projections for the rest of the year, and dig through it. You know, and not necessarily audit it, but I will make sure, I want to see supporting documentation for everything, I want to, and so I would put a second set of eyes on it. That's a consulting piece, I'm not giving an opinion on it, I'm just taking a look at it. So those are the type of consulting things that suggested may make sense. The school committee agreed to it, the superintendent called me last week and said, Jim, could you put that in writing for me? And like I said, I did it, and I sent it over on the 11th. And as I said, I think to Eileen, what was it? I said, I do have other clients besides Burlington, and I didn't get to it until the 11th, but I was requested that in the previous week. And so that's kind of how that letter came through. Again, I don't expect that to overlap for the work, because we're focusing on 18 operating as opposed to policies and procedures. We may have some suggestions as part of the audit work that would be done, or the agreed upon procedures work, as part of that. So if I find anything when I do that deep dive that isn't addressed in the new policies and procedures, I will make a recommendation on that finding that you need to add this because for whatever reason or whatever thing I find, if you go through this particular process. Does that kind of answer what you were asking?
It goes halfway there.
Okay.
I think that giving advice on procedures going forward and looking at what hasn't happened well in the past with regards to procedures, just has a lot of overlap in the goals that we all share, and I think probably in a lot of the operational things that you do there. So I want to understand the distinction between
Well,
the
the
two.
only- here's the difference. If you take a look at the budget for fiscal year 18, and we haven't audited that yet, but that was accomplished with the prior school business manager under the system he had in place. It's kind of a bottom line type of system. Nicole and I think a consultant, and Bob and Eric changed that completely for fiscal year 19. Okay? How they budgeted, position controls, taking a look at everything as opposed to general, putting it into place and looking at what actually was expended as opposed to the budget. I believe the way the budget was done a lot of times in the past was, well, our last year's budget was this year's budget is now the same thing, a little bit increased. Even though they didn't change the budget line item, and you know, they have a $400,000 budget, but really spent $600,000. And so I think this changes, significant sweeping changes in how things were done without our intervention in 19 compared to 18. Now, looking at the budget and how it was formulated, you can say, well, that's an overlap. But when you have two different systems done two different ways by two different school business managers and administration, you know, not necessarily administration, I would argue that that is not an overlap, because I am not going to give a suggestion on 18 to fix that, because 18 is, in the way it was done, is no longer around. As we speak, it is gone, the way things were done, so that's kind of a waste of time to give a recommendation. What I think wants to happen is that, is the why it happened last year. And if I took a look at the why it happened last year, from my understanding, a lot of the recommendations I would have made would have been exactly a lot of the things that were done prior to us even getting involved with it. It should be a line item budget for every teacher. You know every teacher that's part of it. You know every room that they're in. I mean, all I have to do is open up the website and go to, the Master Simon School, click on staff, and it will give you a list of every teacher, every administrator, everybody in there, where they are, what room they're assigned to. So you already have an accounting for who's there. And I believe is what's happening in the new budget system. So that's why I don't think that it's redundant as, if it was the same system, yeah, that would be redundant, but it's not.
Okay. I need to cut it, okay? You guys, we can have discussion afterwards, but we need to move on, just in fairness to everybody who's, all the other people that are here to present, okay? Eileen, my one last thing is the presenter, or is the proponent.
I'm going to take the liberty of just tagging on to Ed's question. So could you just, in the spirit of fairness, 3 minutes, tell us the distinction between the work that you have to do for the management letter comment for FY18 versus these agreed upon procedures?
Kind of like I think I said before, that we have a different objective. And an audit, I know you spent the money. I can go through. It went through the process. It was vetted by, obviously, the school business office of any expenditures that came through there. It went through Paul's office, who then were required to, in effect, review that again. We do, and from every other department, it all feeds into Paul's office. Okay? Payroll's processed the same way. It's not a special thing that happens at the school. The expenditures are processed the same way. It comes in, different types of approvals. So we test all of that for the town, the entire town, to make sure that these things are fairly stated and that the controls that are in place, both at the school on a limited basis, but I rely on Paul's office to do what Paul's office is required to do by law and regulation, is to make sure that all the expenditures from every department is allowable under the appropriation that was voted at town meeting, or any adjustments to that, and that they've vetted that properly to make sure there's sufficient supporting documentation, not only for the expenditures, but for the payroll, and also for the payroll. So we focus on Paul's office to make sure that they're making sure that every department is following the standard rules, policies, and procedures related to that. Inside of the schools, we don't test the schools' internal budget process, because they have a bottom line budget. When you have a bottom line budget, we assess risk as part of our planning for audits, and you need to do that every year. First thing we do is we do a risk assessment. Where is the likelihood of an error occurring? Well, there's probably a bigger likelihood for error occurring and things being posted to the wrong line item in a lot of other departments, because they have several appropriation that was voted at town meeting that you could move things beforehand. Guess what? School, bottom line. As long as it's school expenditures, and as long as it was posted to a school appropriation, regardless of how, what you did internally and set up all those line accounts, it's allowable and we're done. And that's the difference. What you're asking me to do in the article is to go through and look at the way they budgeted and treat that like you treat if that budget that was originally set. So when you had the $42 million worth of payroll expenses and the $8 million worth of the expenses for the operating budget, and you had the $3 million worth of payroll and the, whatever it was, then $7 million worth of expenses for the accommodated budget, we're going to look at that as if there's line item integrity to that, because that to me is going to tell me the answer to why did this happen, when did it happen, or why did you find it?
Jeff, can I just?
Yeah.
So again, I'm just trying to get my head around the distinction, the difference between the work that you have to do for the management letter comments and the work that you would do under agreed upon.
Well, what I just explained is a management letter comment. I know you were over budget. Okay, we tested the system. What happened is that those expenditures that put you over budget, Paul didn't know about until, in effect, after year end. Nicole didn't really know about until close to year end, a little bit after year end, and that's the problem. So we test to make sure they went through the process, and if the expenditures were going to go through that particular same process. The only change was that Nicole held it up and she realized, oh my God, we're going to be over budget. So my management letter comment will be, you have a material weakness in internal control because the school department did not have, in effect, the knowledge and did not have policies and procedures in place to ensure that if you were going to have a budget deficit, you would have known about it months before that and been able to prepare for that. You need to change your policies and procedures in order to fix that.
So,
I'm done.
So
I'm done from the standpoint of that's what I need for the audit. That's all I need.
So you don't elaborate on that.
So basically, what Article 21 covers is you would look at what went wrong and identify the weaknesses. Okay. The management letter, though, is just a statement of what
What
happened.
statement's a suggestion that
Okay.
overall the policies and procedures are lacking that causes
Okay.
material
So
weakness and
that's-
internal control.
that's
You need-
kind of
And
an-
you need to fix it.
In a nutshell, that's what the difference between the two things are. We're getting a summary for one thing, and then Article 21 is saying, well, we want to understand better the summary and why it happened. You know, very simple term, sorry. I deal a lot with little kids, so I'm used to taking it. Okay, now, the other thing is the Article 20, which has to do with the amount of money that the school committee is asking for to cover that shortfall from 2018. I know, I don't know if okay. Eric was going to be here. Unfortunately, he lives in the North Andover area. They are now fighting fires in. So he needed to go to his house to make sure that things are safe. He has a four-legged friend who he needs to make sure is okay, so that's why he's not here. So, but Bob and Nicole and Christine and Martha are here. Kristen. Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, and Kristen, sorry, I saw you come in. So, I guess that is, if you have questions for them, I think one thing might be is, do we have a dollar of what the amount is?
Yes,
It says it in here.
was the list of the, sorry, I wasn't planning on presenting.
It's all switched around, but I
Yeah,
think.
so the final page in this packet here.
Okay, so in the handout that was up here, explain what's going on. We're here, and this, let's do this. Yeah, if you want to, if you are prepared, I.
Be my guest.
You have the floor.
And I have to have this done by January.
Yeah, that's fine. I want to give you your 10
It
minutes of
took me
fame.
8 months to get information, 8 months.
Don't worry.
So this is not.
Does anyone want this packet?
And that will come out to you in emails. I just got it late today and didn't get a chance to email it before I had to
With
take care of things.
Christmas, are the holidays.
And here's hard copies.
Where did they come
What?
And it will go up on the website in the next day or so when you have a chance. Did you get one? No. Okay.
Thank you.
First, I just want to thank you for your time and interest. It's appreciated. The top letter is just a letter from the school committee expressing our remorse, our regret. We are sorry the town is in this, and we take a full word's worth, but it has hit us very hard to be here in front of you in this terrific thing. So we want to thank you for your time, your understanding, and working through questions. So this has been presented at school committee. This was presented through Ways and Means, also subcommittee, I believe. I don't need a microphone? We're not on. Okay, we are on BCAP, okay. Oh, okay. So FY 2018 closeout. We budgeted salaries, 41,907,710. The actual salaries that we needed to pay out, paid out in June 30th, please help me, is $42,993,625. Difference of $1 million. The final amount that we're coming in town meeting for though is $699,926.54. These are invoices. There's two parts to why these numbers aren't the same. First, in March, and this happens many years, we impose a budget freeze. Start to see that certain accounts might be higher than had planned, so we freeze the budget. So if teachers need more construction paper or things that aren't necessary to continue going, you can go to the art room to get some paper, you know, that stops. The discretionary funding stops. That took 300,000 off, roughly, helped with freezing that budget, not spending, brought the number down. Our operating budget is 84%. Of that, thank you. Yes, our operating budget salary is 84% of the big picture. 16% is non-salary. Of that 16%, we have fixed costs such as utilities. So at that point, we're left with 8% discretionary funds that technically were the freeze. That's why it's only 300,000 versus a larger number. So that went in place, we were able to stop that, so 1 million down to roughly 700,000. Where the budget overruns come from within the salaries. It's not a straight line salary item. So we have substitutes as a subcategory. Is that right? And we have tutors as a subcategory. We have teachers, stipends, vacation buyouts. We had 3 very long-term employees who left. They had vacation buyouts. We were notified of the leaving, I believe, during that year after FY18 had been set and approved. So those 3, so if we go back to substitutes, we budgeted 423,000 roughly. The actual was 636,000. We had a number of maternity leaves. Normally we budget about 20, we were up to 30. It was just a
37.
different.
Okay, on the
37.
next page, it's also, the numbers are on that page where it says areas of fiscal 18 budget shortfall, and the next page has the explanation that Kristen's giving us now.
So the tutors are paid hourly. They had been budgeted at 366,000 roughly. It came in at 657,000 roughly. Those salaries moving forward, FY19, have been capped. Nicole went through, did a great job building it line by item, and there's now a cap on that, and we will, if we need to go over that time, it will come back to the school committee, there'll be a discussion, where does that money then come from? Settlements, vacation buyback, we had 2 settlements. They were in the best interest of the district, they were in the best interest of the children, they were not decided overnight. It's a long process that we went through, and we came up with what was the best interest in the district. That coupled with the 3 buyouts, that coupled with the substitutes being needed, selling, created a much bigger overrun than had happened in the past. Every now and then, one of these areas might go over, and we're able to use a budget freeze, to use different means to transfer that money so it covers it. There was just too much this time. We should have known about, we should have been more on top of it, FY19. We will be, and I'll get to that. No history of overspending, and if you flip this, Mr. Sagarino, if you look at the page by the numbers, the school department has tried to be very fastidious with the money. Accommodated account until this year, we have not gone back to the town to request extra funds. The accommodated account has worked the way it was intended to work when it was set up 12 years ago. Again, we had a number of changes, different special ed circumstances, and we over budgeted. Dr. Conti had been very adamant when we set the budget that he was fearful we wouldn't be able to cover it, and that came to fruition. Operating, going back 2012, again, have not come back to the town until this year. If you go down to the next section, you have previous year's special ed accommodated account, operating account, much smaller. In the past, we've tried to manage the money very assiduously, and we have been able to turn back money to the town, and I believe that was the correct term, turn back. We understand that that can't necessarily be a goal, but it is something we try to do. So, FY19, there was a lot of discussion. Why is this not going to happen again? Reassurance. First of all, we have a line-by-line item. Every time there's a change, Nicole's office, Nicole pretty much right now, inputs it. We have policies in place, we are voting through, they're being tweaked. Mr. Powers has been excellent in helping us, guiding us, blessing certain policies as we are learning. Is this what we need? Does this work? Is there anything else we can do to make it better? As these changes occur, we know about it. One of our policies, for example, we're looking at what should be the threshold, what number. So if there's a change of $5,000 between lines, you come to the school committee. Some towns were up at $75,000. We feel that case is too high for us. So there will be much more open communication between the school committee, between the business department, and assessing these numbers. Every time we need to just hired a Spanish .2 section. We need to see where will that money come from, what other line item. It can't just go in and wait till June to be budgeted. It needs to now find out where that extra money that we will need the Spanish sections be. Again, because Nicole built the budget line by line, she went through. The teacher, she increased the salaries by 2.5%, is that correct?
Teachers 1.5%.
But we increased, sure,
Oh,
yes.
Thank
you.
So if you look at the FY19 reassurance page, basically I went back and looked at what was expensed in 18 versus what we budgeted for in 19. Because of the overspending, it didn't really make sense to compare what was budgeted in 18 to what was budgeted in 19. So if you look at salaries expensed in 18 versus what we budgeted in 19, there's a 2.57% increase in salaries budgeted in 19. And then if the following lines there show the contract increases that we are expecting, that were settled for in FY19, and that those fit in within the 2.57, so that you can reasonably conclude that the 2.57% is an adequate increase for the settled contracts that are in effect for FY19.
So we've increased certain line items based on what Nicole saw building the budget. So moving forward, we're in a better place to cover these costs that occurred in FY18. Next page, so again, just to reiterate, it's a very fluid budget. We have children move in, we have children move out, we have English language students, EL students come in, we need more tutors, students leave, it's very fluid. We have teachers who, for whatever reason, decide they're leaving, and then a new teacher coming in at a higher level of the salary scale or lower. So the difference is, when this all occurs, Nicole in the business department will put it into the budget immediately. We will have budget updates once a month. I think Mr. Powers spoke to that. And we will see those changes in there. We are committed to work with the Ways and Means on that budget update monthly to see October will be our first one. What might we want added to it? What will be a good template that we can use and we can use well moving forward. So we will still have the changes, fluctuation, but in the end, we will be monitoring them literally hour by hour through your office. We put in financial budget analysis, whose job primarily will be that. Is that right? Yeah. So if you, we kind of touched upon this, so I won't take too much time, but the next page, FY18 audit, so where Mr. Powers explained what he's doing, the management letter. If there's anything out of that, again, this is a completely different way in which we're doing the budget in FY19. So there may be some findings in FY18 of the processes, but those findings are almost going to be null because of the way it's being done now. They'll be either corrected or it just won't be able to transfer over because it's no longer being done in that manner. We have committed with Mr. Powers, you will see a lot of us over the next couple of months. He is committed to come in January, as he said, test the budget, test the processes in place, and let us know where there might still be a weakness in our policies process. in the business department and how we're handling those accounts. So we have an electronic purchase order, we have updated policies, the monthly financial reporting. This will also be revolving accounts will be in there also, student activity accounts, there are really 3 different sections. We are going to be monitoring all of them. The financial analysts and accounts payable support people, we're putting more specific hiring in place to really give Nicole and the business department the ability to do this work and to do this work well, the depth that it needs to be. Structural changes, similar, Nicole will be the person saying yes or no. In the past, there were a number of people. That's changing. You can really just have one yes or no person, which means somebody needs to be the one funneling it all through. As I said, we're going to set a limit with the school committee when a change of a certain size needs to come through to us, where that discussion needs to happen. Other changes, the school committee, there was a boiler that at the middle school failed, and it was more of a point of information. In the future, it'll be a discussion. Is the best place for that funding to come out of the revolving account? Should we go and ask for an RFT? No matter what we decide, the key is to have that discussion so everybody is aware it does come out of a revolving building and grounds fund or another area, and then something else occurs, the way we had settlements, the way we had the perfect storm this year, everybody's aware of where money has been coming out to cover other areas, and then we can move forward as a team on how best to address that. So if there are questions with regard to the vendor report. Yeah, okay. So the vendor report, why are we not seeing salaries listed? By law, we need to pay the salaries. The vendor report is in no way listed by priority, just how they came through on the desk. They're all educationally there, approved, they need to be paid, but there was some confusion on why are we not seeing salaries if that's where it was over budgeted.
I appreciate that, but I guess I'm back to the question on books, or on the warrant, which is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or transfer from available funds. Maybe I'm one of the few people that doesn't know what that number is, but what is that number?
Okay. So the number is 600.
$699,926. So that's, sorry to make everything as simple as it can, but that's a lot of times how my mind works. That's the number that you guys are going to be voting on. Okay? Again, I appreciate this presentation. You'll be getting this from the mail, in the email. It'll go out, it'll be available in hard copy at town meeting. So I guess what I'd like to do is, rather than move things along, rather than to have a big discussion, because I know there's been lots of discussions and I've been watching school committee meetings and stuff like that. Is there anybody have a particular question about the dollar amount that you're going to be voting in Article 20?
I'd like to clarify something about the dollar amount.
Okay.
I'm repeating what Kristen said, that the dollar amount represents the bills that we owe, and I want you two to correct me if I say this wrong, that our debt that we owe is $699,000 plus, is debt that we owe to vendors or staff in invoices that were not paid. The overspending was in salary, but we had to pay the salary first. When you look at this list of invoices, it is primarily, it's not that discretionary funding. It's the buses that we have to pay every month. It's the utilities. And there are a lot of teachers' names on the list, and that's because by contract, they are entitled to reimbursements for courses that they take and different things that happen. We have staff who put out their own money for allowable expenses, and they get reimbursed because we don't have a credit card for the school district. So those are people who put out their own personal money, and they're waiting for the school district to pay them back. And so it's money to reinforce that, and there were a couple things that caught my eye. This is what we get every couple of weeks. We get a warrant, and I look through it, and if something looks funny, I ask. So the Marriott invoice looked odd. Well, that's what when we do the breakfast for the scholarship fund. So it was an event that we put on for our scholarship fund that brings in over $300,000 for our students. So that's a reasonable, appropriate expense. There was a Jake and Joe's that was it was a catering. It wasn't everybody went out for drinks. It was a catering bill that was part of the high school budgeted, had money in their budget for it. It's something that they do, you know. So it was a benefit for the teachers. So there may be things that look odd, but if you think back, there are these general categories of bills that were basically not discretionary bills or end of the year bills that couldn't have been held like that other $300,000 that people didn't spend. So I just wanted to clarify that. So the $699,000 is full of lots of little things, and you might look and say, gee, I wonder what that's for. But if you look at each one, there was a reason for it that was allowable, I believe, based on our budget.
I guess the only other question that I have, and I'll ask it and then we'll move on to the next article, is, unless something is somebody said, do we, and maybe this is a question for Paul, do we know yet where we're going to raise or appropriate or transfer from?
There were two options available at this point, would be the stabilization fund or raise and appropriate. We'll talk about raise and appropriate, that would be an increase to the tax levy.
Stabilization, that way.
Stabilization or raise and appropriate.
Ways and means vote last night to use the stabilization fund.
Okay, so that's where it is. And just to clarify, because it's been determined by legal counsel, this will require a 9/10 vote. Okay?
Percent of the vote.
Okay.
It's going to be
Any other, again, questions? I mean,
90%, right?
directly about the amount of money?
You could ask the question of when you
I
don't
don't
get the
think
9
it's going
tenths,
to.
or if we don't, or when it
We
doesn't.
We will hear that on the town meeting floor.
Yes.
Do people want to think about that ahead of time?
Yes, we are.
Probably.
So I'm
It's
asking
pretty
that
dire.
question then.
Okay.
So-
I think it's
I don't
something,
think there's
do
an
you want to think
answer.
about it for 10 minutes, or do you want to think about it and know what the consequences are if you don't?
Well, I don't know that anybody has an answer for it right now unless,
How did legal come up with the 9/10?
That's not the question. The question is,
We can get back to you.
That was the
I will
legal.
Somebody's
That
asking a
was
different
legally
question
done.
right now?
Yeah, but where did it come from?
It's
I mean,
a
I see
hold
what
on, just
what
like,
answer on.
That- you know,
What will happen is that the
Is it in the
Department of
Bible?
Revenue, before they
Okay.
approve the
okay,
recap
we're
for the
bring
year,
an
It's in
answer,
the
so.
thing. Yep,
will require the,
90%.
that has been
it's
passed
the way it's
to be
got to have
added
its own.
for not a raise and appropriate. It is basically just to raise that illegal deficit. And so you're gonna have to raise it anyways, and that'll just go into increase your taxes as opposed to the stabilization fund. And I can't tell you what the vendors would do. If I just took a quick look through the list, and there's two vendors that add up to $450,000, and then 5 or 6 that will get up to over $500,000. I would imagine if I was owed $250,000, I'd probably call my attorneys and sue. And when they entered into the contract with that, you said you had enough appropriation to cover that as part of the contractual. Haven't seen anybody win that because either through law or through equity, they will usually prevail. And what will happen is that it'll just cost you more money in legal fees. I can't guarantee you, I'm just saying that I've seen that happen before and they ended up, but the DOL will make you raise that regardless. If that vote passes, the only thing that's gonna happen is the vendors don't get paid. you will still be required
The towns.
to raise it on your recap.
We were informed of
There
that.
it is, 9/10.
Yeah,
Does that affect the town's rating?
Yep.
no,
Yes,
I mean,
maybe, maybe.
well, having a deficit would, but it's really not going to, for all the stabilization fund and the balances you have, et cetera, I mean, you're only talking about, you know, it's a lot of money, but it's not. Okay, when we talk about, you know, the financial position of the town taken as a whole, yeah, and you look at the total budget, something that shouldn't happen, but I doubt if it will adversely affect you.
At the end of the Ways and Means meeting, John Petrin gave a little talk about this particular aspect of the consequences and enumerated a number of things from, you know, the legal situation, potential impact to bond ratings and interest rates that we have to pay. Depends on how far down the probability curve you want to go, but if you want to go back and watch the
Ways and Means on BCAT.
the tail of the BCAT meeting, there's a full discourse there that John Petrin covered in that context.
Article number 4? Just last topic. This article is up here. No, I have to hold it.
So it's only, it only applies to certain.
Because it's not.
Okay, so the whole article is up here. It's on several slides.
So it's written up
And this is one, and it was on the paper too. This is the one that what is here is the amended article, which will be the motion that will be on the floor at town meeting, okay? This was what was amended by, in conjunction with legal counsel. Okay, so the article that you got printed in your book is slightly different. There are copies of it up here if you want to have a copy of it. The major things deal with the first, some of the first few lines about to re-accept. This is a vote that we took back in 88. Okay.
Wow.
Yep. Okay. Do the rundown, yeah. This is just a brief history. As you will see when you read through this, but maybe for the sake of brevity, I'll summarize it quickly. In 1988, the town meeting unanimously voted to establish a Town of Burlington Scholarship Fund. This was started by a woman whose name is Joan Miles. Her name is prominently displayed on the library at Burlington High School. Joan was a longtime resident of Burlington. She was a long-term school committee member. When she left being on the school committee, she had the passion for education for Burlington students still burned in her heart. So she teamed up with Brian Curtin, an attorney named Carl Sear, other community leaders, and they came before the town meeting and requested the town meeting approve this Chapter 194 of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts state laws. And that chapter provides that the town may establish a scholarship fund to be funded by voluntary checkoff on a tax bill. And that's been on our tax bills and water bills since 1988. Now, in the beginning, the expectations and the hopes of this group of people, and I became one of them and was on the board for 15 years thereafter, was to raise more than just what the checkoff could provide. And so vigorous fundraising was begun, and all of the years since then, the fund has grown larger and larger and larger. A very small percentage of the fund is represented by the fund, by the tax checkoff. In fact, over the years, the checkoff has generated somewhere between $5,000 and $11,000 or $12,000. Not a lot,
when you consider that now the fund has over $1 million. In the year 2012, and the fund was not called the Town of Burlington Fund, they named it the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation. In 2012, the town accountant, and in conjunction with the town auditor, decided that it was not really appropriate for the town of Burlington to be managing a charitable fund. So the recommendation was made and agreed upon that the foundation would separate itself from the town of Burlington's books. And it took about 4 years for that to happen, but over the course of the next 4 years, the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation became the Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation Dollars for Scholars. They're a separate 501c3 organization. In the original charter and in the original law, it says that the scholarship committee shall be appointed by the Board of Selectmen and managed by the town under the auspices of the Board of Selectmen. When the Scholarship Foundation separated and became a separate 501c3, the money was removed from the town's coffers and put into their bank accounts. What happened to the tax checkoff money, though? That still is in the town's, under the town's authority. So what this bill will do, if you approve it, will just simply reaffirm our commitment as a community to funding scholarships through the tax checkoff, and reaffirm that we will comply with the law and establish a scholarship committee under the Board of Selectmen to manage that account. All we're doing here is just keeping a really nice little program alive and making it compliant with the state law. So you want to add anything else?
I don't want to add anything to that, that was it. Pure, simple,
Well, there
straight
must
to
be
the point.
questions.
We're basically
Right to the point.
making our scholarship fund comply with Mass General law.
Yep.
Questions? Okay.
Where's the scholarship committee now?
The Burlington Community Scholarship Foundation, Dollars for Scholars, has their own board of directors and scholarship fund, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So they really don't have any authority to distribute the dollars that are in the town account.
It's currently, so
And we want
there's
that money
no
distributed
committee
in
right
the
now.
proper authority.
So does that money
much is
ever
it?
get to
Is it
be
used?
distributed?
Oh, yes,
Oh, gorgeous.
absolutely. It has been over the years, up until the time that they separated, and then there was sort of a nebulous situation. So there's about $26,000 in there that needs to be distributed, but there's no authority for doing so.
Is the committee established?
No.
No.
No, this would authorize the Board of Selectmen to establish a committee.
How do we ensure that it's an impartial and fair selection?
Well, the Board of Selectmen needs to do that in public session, and the details of how we expect that if this passes, the proponents of this, members who have been involved in the scholarship distribution in the past, and probably the accountant's office will meet together and come back to town meeting in January and say what the procedure would be. Typically would be, we advertise in the newspaper for people to apply to be appointed. The Board of Selectmen reviews those applications. The appointments are 3-year terms of a committee that has a superintendent of schools represented and at least 3 other members of the community, 4 members. Of the
Will all of the positions be volunteer positions?
Absolutely. This is not a fundraising committee. There's not a lot of heavy lifting.
Tax checkoff.
Yeah, it's just for the tax checkoff. As I said, there's not a heavy lifting. It's nothing that's going to be in competition with any other scholarship fund. But we just want to see those monies distributed, because I know that there are people who've been checking off that box for 30 years, and they need to know that money is being sent, given to worthy students and who they are. Right? Yeah.
Thank you. Don't forget to get it revised.
Was there another page?
Yes, there's one more page, which just outlines, kind of what the criteria are based on the Mass General Law. And then, just questions. Okay. So, well, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time. We will be meeting on Wednesday, the 19th, which will be the financial articles. So Paul will be back to talk about all the financial articles. And then we will also be talking about one of the bylaw articles, the one about the plastic bags. So
that's gonna be-
the proponents can't wait for the Thursday night one, which would be the rest of the bylaws.
It's Wednesday here?
Wednesday's here, everything's here.
And the meeting is done about it.
I know where he is. He has been there for years. Yes. I remember, I used to go to the market all the time. Yeah. I know where he is. He has been there for years. Yes. I remember, I used to go.